The brunch had started like every other. Polished silverware, polite laughter, and the faint sound of jazz floating through the restaurant. I was mid-sip of orange juice when Grandpa Walter smiled at me, his eyes soft behind his glasses, and said, "I'm so glad you're enjoying the apartment I got you." The words hit like glass shattering. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The clink of forks died. My throat burned. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. Mom's hand froze around her coffee cup. My sister Megan's phone lowered an inch. Dad, Richard, looked down at his plate like it suddenly demanded his full attention. My pulse pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. "What apartment?" I asked, half laughing, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Grandpa's face flickered in confusion. "The one I bought you after graduation," he said. The table spun. I swallowed hard. "Grandpa, I don't live in any apartment. I've been renting a basement for 4 years." The air turned electric. My father's fork slipped, striking porcelain. Grandpa blinked, his smile fading, replaced by something older, heavier. "That can't be," he whispered. I looked around the table, the same faces I'd grown up with, and for the first time, they all looked like strangers. The silence after my words felt alive, thick, pulsing, impossible to breathe through. I watched Grandpa's eyes cloud over, his hand trembling slightly as he set his mimosa down. "You've been living in a basement?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my throat dry. Dad finally looked up, his face pale. "Kayla, that's enough," he muttered, forcing a smile toward Grandpa. "She's just being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "I pay cash rent to a woman who smokes so much her walls are yellow. I sleep next to a water heater. You call that dramatic?" Mom's eyes darted between us, her lipstick trembling. "Richard, what is she talking about?" Dad leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "Dad, you must have misunderstood. I never received any money." But Grandpa's confusion turned to disbelief. "I wired $70,000 to you," he said, his voice now firm. "You told me you surprised her with the place. You even sent me photos." All color drained from Dad's face. Megan's mouth opened, then closed again. For a long moment, no one spoke. My heart pounded like it was trying to leave my chest. Grandpa's hand pressed flat on the table. "Is that true?" I looked straight at Dad. "Tell him." He didn't. And that's when something inside me cracked, something that had stayed silent for too long. To understand that moment, you'd have to know my family. We were the kind that smiled for holiday photos and spoke in half-truths. Grandpa Walter was the pillar, an old-school man who believed in hard work, Sunday dinners, and quiet generosity. My mother, Elise, was gentle but timid, always smoothing tension instead of confronting it. My sister Megan was the golden one, charmed, admired, untouchable. And then there was Dad, Richard Whitman, the kind of man who measured worth in money and appearances. Growing up, I always sensed a hierarchy I wasn't part of. Megan got praise, I got lessons about humility. When Grandpa sent birthday checks, mine mysteriously turned into family savings. When he gifted Megan a used car for college, Dad said I should learn responsibility and take the bus. I never questioned it out loud. I just assumed maybe I hadn't earned it. That's the quiet poison of favoritism. It makes you believe you deserve less. But now, staring at Dad's tight jaw and clenched fists, the pattern unraveled like a bad seam. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was a system built on deceit. Mom's voice broke the silence. "Richard, please tell me you didn't." He stood abruptly, muttering something about stepping outside for air. Grandpa's gaze followed him, wounded and disbelieving. I couldn't meet his eyes. I felt small and exposed, like every year of quiet endurance had been leading here. That brunch wasn't just awkward. It was the funeral for every lie my family had lived on. After that brunch, I couldn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through the city until the streets blurred, then parked outside my basement apartment, if you could even call it that. The air smelled of cigarettes and damp concrete. A single bulb flickered above the door, buzzing like it resented being alive. Inside, the air was cold and still. The ceiling pipes groaned every few minutes like tired lungs. My bed sat next to the boiler. The hum of machinery was the lullaby I'd gotten used to. I'd lived like this for 4 years. 4 years of pretending it was fine, that it was temporary, that I didn't mind living underground while my father talked about building character. I sat on the edge of the bed, remembering every job I'd taken to survive. Cleaning houses, waiting tables, designing cheap logos for clients who never paid on time. I thought of every time Dad had told me, "You chose your path, Kayla. Life doesn't hand out gifts." But now I knew he'd pocketed the one gift meant to give me a start. Tears came, hot and fast. Not because I'd lost money, but because I'd lost time, pride, and trust. I realized I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into a family that only valued silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks like a map of everything I'd broken trying to belong. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my door, a sound so out of place it startled me. When I opened it, Grandpa was standing there, holding 2 coffees. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his eyes tired but fierce. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I stepped aside. For a long moment, he just looked around the cramped space, the sagging couch, the yellowed walls, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. "This is where you've been living?" he murmured. I nodded, embarrassed. "I didn't want pity," I said quietly. He set the coffee down and turned to me. "You shouldn't need pity, Kayla. You should have had support." His voice broke slightly on the last word. He asked for the full story, how long I'd been here, what jobs I'd taken, every detail. I told him everything. By the end, his hands were trembling. "Your father lied to me," he said, more to himself than to me. "He stole from both of us." When he looked up again, his eyes were steel. "We're going to the bank tomorrow. I want every transfer traced." "Grandpa, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted. "Because this isn't just about money. It's about what kind of people we choose to be when truth comes knocking." He left soon after, but before he went, he placed his hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone in this anymore," he said. For the first time in years, I believed him. The next day, Grandpa picked me up before sunrise. He drove in silence, the kind that isn't empty but heavy with purpose. The city was still half asleep as we pulled into the brick building downtown, the bank where he'd done business for 30 years. Inside, the banker, a stern woman in her 50s, greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Whitman, it's been a while." He nodded curtly. "Let's see the transfer records from 4 years ago. $70,000, meant for my granddaughter, Kayla." She hesitated, then clicked through her computer. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. "Here it is," she said finally. "Funds sent from your account to Richard Whitman, your son, marked as a gift for Kayla's condo." My chest tightened. Grandpa's jaw worked silently. "And where did it go after that?" he asked. She clicked again. 5 days later, the amount was transferred into an investment account under Richard Whitman's name. Grandpa's voice turned cold. "Print everything." As we left, he called his lawyer from the car, his tone sharp, commanding. Nothing like the warm man I'd grown up with. "File the paperwork," he said, "and draft a letter revoking Richard's financial power of attorney immediately." He hung up and glanced at me. "This isn't just betrayal, Kayla. It's theft. And I intend to make it right." I stared out the window as the sun broke through the morning fog, lighting the skyline. For the first time, justice didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breath. That afternoon, Grandpa parked in front of the house I hadn't entered in 4 years. It looked the same, white porch, trimmed hedges, a front door that still squeaked. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't coming as a daughter. I was coming as the truth. Dad opened the door, eyes narrowing the moment he saw Grandpa behind me. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk," Grandpa said flatly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and lies. Mom appeared from the kitchen, her hands already shaking. Megan hovered on the stairs, sensing a storm. Grandpa didn't sit. He placed a manila folder on the coffee table and spoke calmly, each word like a nail hammered into silence. "You told me Kayla was living in the apartment I bought her. You sent me photos. But the bank records prove you transferred the entire $70,000 into your own account." Dad scoffed. "You can't prove intent. I was holding it for her future." "For her future?" I said, my voice steady for once. "While I lived in a basement next to a boiler." He turned to me. "You needed to learn independence, Kayla. I wasn't going to hand you a free life." Grandpa's voice thundered, not loud, but commanding. "You didn't teach her independence, Richard. You taught her betrayal." The room went dead silent. For the first time, Dad's confidence cracked. And in that silence, I found my voice. The next Sunday, the family gathered again at the same restaurant, same table, same sunlight spilling through the windows. But nothing felt the same. Grandpa sat at the head this time, a thick envelope resting in front of him. I sat beside him. Dad and Mom arrived late, looking as if they'd aged years in a week. When the chatter began to die down, Grandpa rose slowly, clearing his throat. "Before we eat, there's something I need to say." His voice carried across the room, calm but cutting. 4 years ago, I sent money to help Kayla begin her life. I was told she received it and was thriving. He paused, eyes hardening. That was a lie. The air snapped tight. Mom's lip trembled. Dad shifted in his seat. "Dad, we don't need to sit down," Grandpa said, the authority in his tone absolute. He opened the envelope and slid a paper across the table toward Dad. "Read it." Dad stared at it, then at me. His hand shook. "You're humiliating me." Grandpa didn't blink. "No. You humiliated yourself when you stole from your daughter and called it love." Finally, Dad began to read, his voice breaking. It was a written confession, an admission that he'd taken the $70,000, lied about it, and would repay it in full. Every word fell like stone. When he finished, no one clapped. No one breathed. Grandpa said quietly, "No more pretending." I met Dad's eyes and whispered, "You taught me one thing, though. How to stand up when the truth finally shows up." The room erupted after that. Murmurs, gasps, the scrape of chairs. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin stared like she'd just witnessed a crime. Mom tried to hold Dad's arm, but he pulled away, his pride unraveling right there under the soft clink of silverware. Grandpa stayed standing, unflinching. "This family was built on trust," he said. "And today that foundation cracked. But maybe it's not too late to rebuild. Just not with lies." Dad looked small, almost childlike. His shoulders slumped. "I thought I was doing what was best," he muttered, eyes down. "For who?" I asked. "For me? Or for the version of yourself you were trying to protect?" He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. Megan's voice cut through the tension. "Kayla, I didn't know." Tears glistened on her lashes. "If I did, I swear I would have said something." I believed her. Maybe that was growth, or exhaustion. Mom's hands trembled as she whispered, "I failed both of you." Grandpa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then help fix it." The check came, though no one had eaten. When we finally stepped outside, the sun felt almost violent after so much darkness. Dad lingered behind, watching us leave. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he just whispered, "You'll understand someday." But I already did. I understood that silence is its own kind of thief, and I was done feeding it. It's been a year since that day. I live in a small but beautiful apartment downtown. Real windows, sunlight that floods the room in the morning. Every creak in the floor reminds me that this place is mine, earned not by inheritance, but by survival. Grandpa visits every Sunday. He always brings fresh flowers and insists on making coffee, even though he burns every pot. Sometimes we talk about the past. Sometimes we just sit in quiet gratitude. His health isn't what it used to be, but his spirit, his fierce honesty, keeps both of us alive in ways money never could. Dad repaid the money, just as he promised. But the distance between us remains wide and unbridgeable. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I don't hate him anymore. I just stopped expecting him to be the father he never was. I've built something new from the wreckage. I started a small design studio, nothing grand, but enough to give me purpose. Each time I sign my name on a project, I think about how close I came to losing myself to silence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love without truth is poison, and silence protects the wrong people. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Stand up, even if it's at your own family's table. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't payback, it's peace.